Thank you. Thanks for everybody for coming. This is quite a crowd. We've got standing room only, and that's a wonderful thing. I just want to take a second to acknowledge my wife is here, Jessie. I dedicated the book to her. And my folks are here, and lots of friendly faces in the audience from various communities in Buffalo, so I appreciate that. Thank you all for coming. What I had hoped to do was talk a little bit first about the book, then do a reading, a short reading. I recorded the audiobook. I was lucky enough to do that. So if you really want to hear my voice do the whole thing, you can do that. So I'll do kind of a short section, and then we'll do some question and answer at the end, if that works. Where I wanted to start was talking about a trip that I made in May. The first weekend in May every year is the EOD Memorial down in Florida. In EOD, I'm going to say that a lot. That's Explosive Ordnance Disposal. That's the bomb squad. It's what I did. It's my career field. And every year, we have a ceremony to put the names on the wall of all of the men and women who died in that last year. We have a memorial wall. There's 4 panels to that wall, one for each of the services. And it's just a list of names and dates of who they were and their rank and when they died. And so every year in May, if they died in the last year, we go down there and we honor them, and they read every name every year. And then they say something about the folks that died that last year. So I went down in May because I had a very, very good friend that died in January. The closest of close friends, his wife, so close to my wife. My kids are the same age as his kids, so really important to us. So I had not been for a couple years, but we went down this year. We put 18 names on the wall this year. So that was the most since 1945. It was a really bad year. And when they read all the names, it took them 22 minutes to read all the names this year of everybody on the wall from the first ensign in the 1940s all the way to the very last one. So I start by talking about that for a couple of reasons. One is, there were 1,000 people that came to that. Active duty service members, guys who got out like me, veterans, all the family members. When I wrote the book, I'm thinking about them. And when I think about, when I lay awake at night thinking about how the book is going to be received, I don't think about the critics in New York or, the coverage I'm going to get in a paper or whatever else. That's all wonderful and nice, and it's wonderful to see, and it's very gratifying. But what I really think about is, how are those guys going to feel about my book? And will it feel right to them? And will it make sense to them? And there's an old tradition in the EOD world that if your name appears in the paper, or if you're on TV, you owe a case of beer to the unit. Okay? Now, there's a couple of reasons for this. One is EOD guys like to drink beer, and it's on, we're not afraid on a Friday to pop a few open and kind of, be done with the week. The other reason is it's an encouragement to really just keep your mouth shut. Nobody needs to know what you're doing. Just do your job and go home. And everybody in that community knows what you're doing, but you don't need to talk to anybody else about it. Well, I broke that rule, right? I wrote a whole book. So I've kind of accepted that I owe beer everywhere I go, from now on. So I broke that rule. So it's really important to me that the feedback that I get from the guys, and I'm extremely lucky, and I feel fortunate and really, really very grateful that everything I have heard so far has just been overwhelmingly positive. Guys in the book are saying, thank you for putting us in the book. We're honored to be in the book. They're saying things like, we feel the same way, and you just made it okay to say so. And that's just the most overwhelmingly, I'm just overcome by that. And I feel like it should go the other way. I feel like I'm honored and thankful that they let me tell, just a little bit of their story when I do this. The other reason I wanted to start with the EOD Memorial is because it reminds me how grateful I am that my tours were so easy. And, just what an average experience I had. What a really, my unit, it's not like we lost a whole bunch of guys. It's not like we got caught on some Afghan mountaintop and I was the only survivor or something like that. Nothing like that. I had an average tour. I did my job and I came home. And when I look around at that group, the number of missing arms and legs and burns and everything else, it brings that all home. So what was my average experience? So I was a bomb tech, which means that we take apart the IEDs and we go to blast scenes, places where a car bomb or an IED has already gone off, and we collect the evidence and try to figure out who did that. We try to blow up as many weapons caches as we can possibly find, so they can't make an IED to begin with. I did all of that. I did a couple tours. I did 3 total, one in Saudi Arabia over 2001 when I wasn't yet a bomb tech, and then 2 in Iraq, one in Balad and one in Kirkuk. Came home, moved back to Buffalo in 2007, and I thought everything was fine, and I got a job, and everything was fine for a couple years, until one day when it wasn't fine anymore. And I guess that's really what I wrote the book about, which was the struggle to figure out what was wrong when I got home, and then the things I did over there. Something was happening to me physically that I didn't understand. I had a physical reaction. I didn't feel worried or stressed, and I wasn't having nightmares, and I wasn't jumping at car doors, and I wasn't doing all these stereotypical things that they tell you is what PTSD is going to look like, or any of those coming home issues are going to be like. I had a physical feeling in my chest that I had no name for, and so I went to the emergency room for a heart attack, and I went back a couple times, and it was never a heart attack, and they hooked me up to all the monitors and the EKG and everything else, and no, there's nothing physically wrong with you. So then I got referred. I guess the system worked a little bit. I would not have put myself in the right office. They referred me to the right office, and I eventually ended up in the mental health clinic, which once again helped me with a lot of this. I remember, I should say, the day that I realized that I could write a book, or I maybe writing a book was a good idea. I was taking a lot of notes. I was scribbling things for the therapist, and I was going on one of my runs. Running was one of the very few things that helped the feeling go away because I was so tired. I didn't have time to feel that. And I dropped my son off at a soccer game or a soccer practice, and then I ran from his school down Whitehaven Road to the river and back, which is about 8 miles. And on that 8-mile run, I remember the moment where I said, maybe this was something I could do. So I took a year and I wrote the book. I always, I had written before. When I moved back to Buffalo in 2007, I wrote this little thing for Newsweek, about how strange it was to be moving from Las Vegas to Buffalo. And, so I guess I had written before to make sense of the world, but I was so down deep in whatever I was in, writing about it didn't really make sense as a thing to do until my therapist recommended it in that day when I was running. So I'm gonna talk about, or I'm gonna read now, kind of a couple of those different kinds of sections. When I thought about what to read, I had a couple of considerations. One of which is that this book doesn't really go in chronological order. It doesn't start in Iraq and then move through. Everything is all mixed together because that's how it felt to me. It felt like I was over there and I was back here and everything all at the same time. So to organize my thoughts, I had this giant sheet of butcher paper that I put on the wall, and I color-coded all the different sections and vignettes in different colors. One color for things in the past in the war, and a different color for the present-day things in what was going on now, and then with the crazy feeling, which is what I call it, crazy with a capital C, and then a final one for kind of the therapy and how, some of my recovery, and there wasn't a lot of that color. There was mostly the other two colors. So I'm gonna kind of read one of each of those. The other thing that I need to think about is, as you might have already noticed, I don't have that much of a filter anymore. One of the issues with Some of my,